Hello, mother. Hello, father. Here I am at Camp Granada. Good morning. Uh, Welcome to another stream. Tired this morning. My son was up late last night. And yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it? Just one of those things. And obviously the hay fever's still getting to me, but you know what? I try and do it for you. I plod through for you. We're doing quite well with the spec, to be honest. We're sort of blasting through it. I know that I've had a couple of requests for certain videos. So I am going to do those. Like I will put them up, about specific topics. So don't worry about that. Feel free to get in contact and everything like that. There is no issue. But yeah, I hope you've had a good. This is on the other side of Easter, by the way. Now, so if you're watching this in the future, this is on the other side of Easter. I hope you've had a good Easter, everyone. I don't think it really matters. Like, I still don't understand this thing about Easter at the minute. About oh, it's Easter, and you're going to do everything differently. Well, not really. I've just done exactly the same as I have been doing for weeks and weeks now. But yeah, I hope this finds you well, and I hope that it finds people around you well, and that you're keeping yourself safe and things like that. And we're going to get straight into it with some revenue and costs today. Now, if you are just to say, if you are rejoining us after the Easter break, and you've sort of had a couple of weeks off, which is fair play. That's just why not? You've been working so hard. That you need a break. That's fine. If that's you, feel free to go back and have a look at the previous stuff, because we've been carrying on as normal, haven't we? People who are always here, we've been carrying on as usual. Yeah. Anyway, we're gonna get straight into it and get on with some stuff today. So, yeah, let's do it. So, here we are. So, business revenue and costs, types of costs, calculating costs, revenue and profit. They're the things that we're going to talk about. You cannot avoid talking about these things in business. You probably have talked about them a hell of a lot in your exam prep already. You've probably talked about them a hell of a lot in terms of, exam questions. And to be honest, when we talk about business, we talk about costs and we talk about revenue a hell of a lot anyway. So even though we're not, it's funny that we actually talk about them. And you will have talked about them, even if you're brand new to business, you will have talked about these things without necessarily knowing that's what you're talking about. So you are more of an expert in this than you think you are. And a lot of it is self-explanatory. There's some little tiny bits that are a little bit more complicated, but a lot of it is really, really easy stuff there. So it's probably not going to take us as long as the average stream would take us, just because it's... it's not as difficult as it is. But remember, we've got the news coming up at the end of the stream. We'll have a look at them as well. All right, let's have a go. So before we start, let's have a look at these questions. It says, identify 3 costs that a clothes shop will have to pay for. So I need you to start thinking in context. I know it's early considering we're off. You need to start thinking in context again. So always thinking, right, what context is this? A big business? Is it a small business? Is it a niche business? Is it a mass market business? What is it that this business is doing? How easy is it for them to sell things, make revenue, and how difficult it is to make, to sort of satisfy costs and things like that. So it says identify 3 costs that a clothes shop will have to pay for. You could have anything like this, couldn't you? Raw materials, they're going to have to pay for clothes, they're going to have to pay for staff wages, they're going to have to pay for electricity, they're going to have to pay for heating, they're going to have to pay for security, they're going to have to pay for insurance. There's quite a lot, isn't there? Which of the costs identified do you think that they would have to pay even if there are no customers walked into the shop? And this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because a lot of the time we don't think about... the cost that we would incur. I mean, this is an ideal time, isn't it? We've got a shutdown, we've got a lockdown happening at the minute. If we look at what's happening, all those costs still need to be paid, even if there's no customers. And for a hell of a lot of companies at the minute, there are no customers. So have a think about it. If you get stuck in the future, the silver lining to this situation is you've got some real world experience of businesses actually shutting down and actually having to pay costs. So what kind of things? Well, you've still got the wages to pay, haven't you? To an extent. All right, if it's wages and they're hourly paid, you don't have to pay them. But in this circumstance, if the whole place was shut down, there is an expectation that you will still pay for people because they've got mortgages to pay and things like that. So in a usual circumstance, you could probably say, well, salaries you would have to pay, wages you wouldn't, because they're not working and they could be on a 0 hours contract, blah blah blah. But in reality, yeah, you're probably gonna have to pay something towards wages. You're still gonna have to pay your heating. You're still gonna have to pay your lighting. You're still gonna have to pay insurances and things like that. So there's a hell of a lot of stuff that you're still gonna have to pay for raw materials even if you don't sell them. So a vast majority of stuff you are still gonna have to pay for, despite things being open. And this is what's causing businesses in the UK and abroad at the minute so much problems. These are continual outgoings, especially if you're self-employed and things like that. Why do firms want to keep their costs and expenditure as low as possible? Hopefully that's a pretty obvious thing, but to maximise revenue, to maximise, not maximise revenue, but maximise profit. We want to make the most we can. Remember, one of the most prominent reasons people go into business is to make money, is to make a profit. So it's just sensible business, that, isn't it? It's just about making sure that you keep your costs low and maximise your revenue. Hopefully you come out with the most money that you've got. Why might there be a problem of trying to get supplies too cheap? Well, potentially we have an issue with quality, don't we? If we are if we're getting them too cheaply and things like that, or they might not be sensibly sourced, or whatever it is. There's a range of problems there, isn't there? So if Sid pays 50p to buy a Mars bar and sells it for £1, does this 50p represent profit? Now, we've done this recently, so you tell me, you shout it at the screen for me, what kind of profit is that? Okay. It's not net profit, is it? It's not actual profit. That's gross profit. Why is it gross profit? Because we haven't taken into account the fixed costs. We've taken into account direct cost in terms of the variable cost, the cost directly linked to the sales of the good, the cost of sales, but we haven't taken into account all the other things that takes into heat in the shop, light in the shop, securing the shop, all those different things. Okay. What is the benefit of charging a high selling price? Well, there's a couple of things, isn't there? Number one is that you get potential revenue. So as long as you can keep your costs in check, then there's more chance of actually making a good profit, isn't there? One of the big things about a high selling price, also from a sort of like a further standpoint, is the psychological effect that it's going to have on your consumer. Because if you charge a high price, then people assume it's going to be good quality. We've done the same. We did it just earlier when we said, "What's the problem of buying like raw materials too cheaply?" And the answer is, well, if you do it, you might get a bad quality. But so there's no guarantee of that. It could be fantastic quality and really, really cheap, but there's the expectation, isn't there? Sort of that psychological effect on us that we think, oh, there is definitely a connection between how much we pay and the value of the thing or the quality. What is the potential problem of charging a high price or too high of a price? The issue is that you get that you're undercut by someone else. If you don't have that strong sort of brand name, or that you are maybe not as dominant in your market or something like that, and you have a competitor who can come in and just undercut you with price, then you're going to have that issue again and again, aren't you? Yeah. And most businesses, depending on the circumstance which is happening in the external environment, will depend on sort of completely impact on how much you can play with that in terms of how powerful you are in your market at that time. Okay, so let's get straight on anyway. Let's keep moving. So a little couple of things, as I said, just to hopefully draw your attention to the fact that you already know quite a lot of this, actually. So learning objectives, what we're going to have a look at today. Well, explain what is meant by cost, revenue, and profits. Identify costs to a business, including fixed, variable, semi-variable, direct, indirect, overheads costs, and total costs. Calculate revenue, costs, and profit. Interpret revenue, costs, and profit calculations. Evaluate the impact of costs, revenue, and profit on business and its stakeholders. Calculate and explain what is meant by contribution. All right, contribution is a really important one. I don't know if you remember that from what we've talked about previously, but we are going to recover that. So let's go to the basics. All right, it's funny that we've not really talked about this. We use the term revenue a lot, but we don't really go into detail about why it's so important. But revenue is the term to use to describe the income received from selling goods and or services. Important to understand that you can have different revenue streams as in different places that revenue come from. So you might be getting, a revenue stream from this service, a revenue stream from this product. So you could have multiple revenue streams, but hopefully all paying into the same pot, and then you're going to be successful because you're making revenue from a range of places. There is a formula, and I would say write the formulas down, because ultimately you are not going to get them in the exam. They're not going to give you the formulas. So while we're going through them, write them down, and then you've got the startings of a list. Now, we have talked about them in previous videos, and you can go through and sort of cherry pick the formulas out. Do you remember what we said? There was a very, very much a reoccurring formula that comes in, which is something divided by something else times 100. Is used a hell of a lot in business to explain market share, and to use the big one that I always remember for is market share. But there's loads and loads of different ones that you can use it for. Capacity utilization and things like that. So don't forget about those. But let's write these down as we go, if you can. So selling price times quantity sold equals total revenue. So what are we actually doing there? So selling price, how much we've actually sold it for, times quantity sold, how many we are selling. You'd be surprised how many students mess this up as well. And it seems obvious when you think about it. Just think it through in terms of, just sensibly think about the situation. What is actually happening here? How do you find out the revenue? Well, how many have I sold and how much have I sold them for? It's pretty simple, isn't it? So what would happen to a total revenue if a firm increased its selling price? Well, this is where some AO4 comes in, isn't it? Well, if we increase our selling price and there's no other external factors that are massively affecting it, like your price elasticity of demand or your income elasticity of demand and that kind of stuff, then hopefully, if no costs have increased, then your revenue will go up. Then hopefully your profit might increase. But it's dependent on your costs not increasing by a similar amount. Because if they go up at the same time, you're not going to gain anything, are you? So in reality, why might total revenue actually go down if a firm charges more for its goods or services? Well, you've got price elasticity of demand, haven't you? You've got income elasticity of demand as well. So if we take ourselves back to price elasticity of demand and start thinking, right, well, if you put your price up, then there's going to be less people buying your product. Okay, how many less people are going to be buying your product? Well, that's up for debate, isn't it? Because you would have to have a look at the sort of the amount of whether it's an inelastic product or an elastic product at the same time. You've got to think about what your competitors are doing at the same time. If they put their prices down by more than you, then or they're a stronger brand or something like that, then potentially, even though you put your price down, you might actually come out with you put your price up, you might actually come out with less. So or it could happen the other way as well. Potentially, it could go up even though you're selling less products. That's the idea, isn't it? Sell less products but make more profit. But it's not always as simple as that. Ed Sheeran would find it easier to increase prices for his gigs than the Vamps. Why is that? Well, because Ed Sheeran is about a mass market of product that you can physically get, isn't he? He plays pop music. He's marketed at the average consumer, but he isn't. He's not aimed at the average consumer at all. He's aimed at about as mass market as you physically can get. And you know how I feel about Ed Sheeran. I'm not going to go into bashing Ed Sheeran on this. Very talented bloke, but. Yeah, he's what's wrong with music for me. I really don't like the idea of mass market stuff like that. That's just everybody's supposed to like. But yeah, talented guy. Some of the things he does is quite catchy, isn't it? But yeah, I think wasn't there recently or in the last couple of years there was a time when like all the top 10 music in the top 10 was all him or something like that, and they actually had to change the way it works because it was basically all Ed Sheeran music, and then he was re-releasing the same music with different people, and I just it felt like a money grab to me. And maybe I'm sure we've got fans of Ed Sheeran watching, and I'm sure you loved every second of it, didn't you? You bloody loved it, didn't you? But and fair play to you. I'm not taking away from the fact your enjoyment from the situation. But yeah, if we think about this, he's about as mass market as he can. He's got a really, really strong following and things like that. And there's more consumers to back it up. So even if Ed Sheeran decided to put his prices up, it would take a lot of people's willingness and ableness to purchase a product out. There's a hell of a lot of people who could replace him, couldn't we? So yeah. Whereas the Vamps are a little bit more, significantly more niche, and in comparison to him, everybody's niche, aren't they? but they would find it more difficult. They would have a hell of a lot less, more elasticity of demand than Cheerum would be, even though both of them are still quite elastic products. So, what factors other than price might influence the quantity of goods or services sold, e.g., demand? Identify whether these factors are internal or external. So, feel free to pause the stream, have a little think, write some of these down. But let's have a think about these together. What factors other than price might influence the quantity of goods or services sold? Well, there can be a range of things of these, can't they? And whether they're internal and external. So let's do internal first. Well, we've got quality, haven't we? So internal quality. We've got the sort of innovation which has happened to actually create the product, the marketing that's just gone around the product to make sure that we actually sell it. And we remember from the promotional mix, we've got PR, we've got all these different things. We've got our direct selling, depending on what sort of techniques we're using to actually sell this product. I think that the marketing is going to have a massive impact on the quantity of goods that are demanded, and the brand. So don't forget about the packaging, the way it's sold to people, celebrity endorsement, lots of different things that could be internal when they basically our connection to that thing, and our ability to actually produce is a good one as well. Our actual ability to get the stuff out there. They're constantly saying, oh yeah, well this stuff's sold out at the minute, or we're not able to get things. And you can see how people have panic bought when they thought that there was a potential for not being able to buy things. Although it's not been half as bad as it seemed, is it? And it might get worse, but at the minute it seems to be okay. So there are all your internal factors. What about your external ones? Well, your external ones are significant as well, aren't they? The economy, whether there's a pandemic on, whether your competitors are doing something significant, whether there's any laws that have come in to change anything, whether the economy is booming, whether people have got money, whether you've got an access to credit. There's a significant amount of external ones, isn't there, that all affect whether people buy things or not. But it's about that psychology. One thing I do want to, I'll just to come back to this in a second. I did want to cover something with you all because people have been. I got a couple of emails actually about this, and I forgot to do it. About what's going to happen over the other side of this pandemic. What's going to happen to the economy and things like that. Now, obviously, being Mr. Businessman, I can give you my opinion in terms of what's reasonable to think. But if you think about what's happening, we've got a situation where we are going to go into a recession because of the amount of money that this country's spending on things, and the fact that there is a definite. Remember, the sort of technical way that we describe a recession is the lack of growth in an economy for a certain amount of time, and it definitely will not have grown for a certain amount of time. So we will definitely go into recession if we're not already in recession. I would be surprised if we're not already, or technically we're not. We might be on the verge of being. But remember, hopefully we know by now that a lot of businesses do well in recessions, and it's not just us that are going to go in recession. It's going to be global again. So it's not necessarily something to be as worried about as it would have been last time, because if it was just us having a recession, then yeah, I'd say be worried, but we're not. The whole country is under the same situation that everybody else is in. So what I think is going to happen is there's going to be a time of there's going to be a time when we all are going to have to go without a little bit more. The austerity things. If you thought 2008 was bad, wait until the government decides to try and make the money back from this, because funding the EU for a couple of months. I think we've probably funded the EU in terms of spending for the next sort of 100 years. From in terms of, what was it, 120 billion or something? They said that they just put into the economy, and they're continuing to put money into the economy. So it's insane money. It's really, really is absolutely incredible. But what's going to happen on the other side is we are going to have this time of low growth and things like that. But also there could be a positive side of things that where once we've come out the other side, then there will be this time where everybody wants to buy things as well. If they've got money to, I know that there are a number of people in the country that are struggling financially because of the current situation. So once they get back on their feet, they'll still want to buy things, and obviously the price elasticity of things, and the income elasticity of things, and the brand of things, and the nature of the product itself will massively affect people's willingness to buy things. That's why I bring it up now, because it seems very specific to this situation. So yeah, it is going to be tough for a little while in terms of the economy. But it's not the end of the world. It's not like, you know, I don't know where the country is getting all this money from that allegedly they don't have. But listen, if they're spending it on the right things. I tell you another thing that's getting on my wick at the minute, though, is, you know, loads of people donating money to the NHS. I donate money to the NHS every month in my wages, and I'm annoyed that that people are treating it like it's a charity, like we should be giving money to them. It's fantastic, give money to them if you want, but why are we in a situation where the government has underfunded the NHS so badly that people have to do that? That's ridiculous, and it's for, you know. And I'm not having a jab at people who are trying to raise money for it. That old guy who's been walking up and down raising money. Fair play to the guy. That's fantastic. Really, really well done to him. But the NHS is not a charity. It's a government organisation that should be adequately funded to be able to deal with situations like this. And it's not like we didn't know that this wasn't coming, because we knew for a little while that we did. But even if it wasn't this, it would be something else. But donate to them all this stuff. Why haven't we got decent supply chains in place? Why haven't we got all this stuff? It's crazy to me that we're in a situation like that. But anyway, let's get on with it, because we don't want to get too sidetracked. But that's what I'm thinking about at the minute. It naffed me off a little bit that people are talking about that. Rather than clapping them, give them a pay rise. That's what I'd do. You know, like I think that's what they prefer. I think it was is it Italy have been giving all the frontline responders, I think it's about €1,500 as a bonus, and they're all getting a pay increase. Yeah, I think the NHS staff would prefer that than being clapped. You know, being clapped is great, but I think we'd prefer just a pay increase. You know, some danger money. Even the what's it called? Even the army get danger money, don't they, and things like that for being in dangerous situations. And people are dying left, right, and centre. You know, it's a crazy situation we're in. So why not stop clapping them and give them some money? Anyway, let's get back to it. Why would a firm want to accurately predict future demand for goods and services? Well, this is all about your planning, isn't it? It's all about your planning. It's all about your making sure that you plan your cash flow, that you plan your, you make sure that you're aware of your break-even point and how that's going to affect the company and things like that. But also seasonality for your products and things like that. Excuse me. If you don't plan for them, then realistically, then how are you going to be able to cope with them when they inevitably come along? You are going to be unprepared, aren't you, for things like that? So why do we prepare for anything? It's like weightlifting, isn't it? Would you just go into a weightlifting competition with no practice at all? Would you try and run a marathon with no practice? Of course you wouldn't. It'd be insane to. Would you try and do a business exam without lots of Mr. Businessman? Probably not. It's not sensible to anyway. Or attending college, or doing the whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. If you're trying to go in just blind and do it off the cuff, it's very unlikely you're going to succeed, isn't it? Okay, so let's do a couple of calculations. You can do these by yourself. You should be able to do them really, really quickly. It says 1 million bars of soap are sold at 65p each. So just do some revenue things for me. I'll do them too. I'll do them really quickly for you on here. Alright, I'm just finding my calculator. So feel free to do them yourself. Let's hold it a second and you do it. So 1 million bars, 65p each. You get 650k for that one, yeah. So 650 grand it would be, because you do a million times 0.65, don't you, for that. What else have we got? A price of £12 that sells 550,000. So we just do 550,000 times 12. That's 6,600,000. Total revenue 800,000 is made from 40,000 units. How much is each user sold it for? Just divide it up. 800,000 units divided by 40,000 units. 20. Okay, so I wonder what they were selling. So they were 20 quid each. And final revenue 450,000 is made when we sold for £60. How many have they sold? So 450,000 divided by 60, 7,500 units. You see how it works? Really, really simple. I'm just doing it on my calculator. So it's either timesing or dividing, essentially, isn't it? You either times them up together to get the revenue, or you find out the revenue to begin with and divide it up to find out the original. Okay, types of costs. Let's do fixed costs first. So fixed costs are costs that do not vary with output. Really important. Do not vary with output. It doesn't matter how many of these you make, or it doesn't matter how many of the thing they produce within this thing. That it doesn't affect the price, or rather the cost to you. So you have got some stuff in your books for the live books to go with this, but basic ones for this are things like rent, things like salaries. It doesn't matter how much I'm salaried. It doesn't matter how much or little I do. In a normal college day, I could work 24 hours a day and I'd be paid exactly the same as if I didn't work at all. And that's because I'm paid a salary. Whereas the same thing for rent and things like that. If you were to say, for example, before I was doing these videos, my house wasn't used as anywhere to produce content, was it? In terms of this, it doesn't cost me any more in rent. In my mortgage. I don't pay any more for my mortgage now that I'm producing these things from here. So I'm producing content, I'm producing a product, aren't I? But I'm not actually paying any more, because ultimately my mortgage is a set rate. It doesn't matter what I do in this house. It's my house and I can do whatever I want in it. I could create millions of videos. I could create no videos. It makes no difference. It's no more expensive or cheaper to do it. Okay. A lot of places use it with rent. It's the same, isn't it? If you were to rent a building, it's no more expensive if you rent something, if you do loads of something in it. So if you were a dance teacher, and you were doing dance classes, if you did, if you were able to do 100 people a week in one room, then it wouldn't be any more expensive than if you did dance lessons to one person, or vice versa, if you did none, essentially, versus 50 or something like that. So they still have to be paid. It doesn't matter, though, if you are making any money. This is the things that people are talking about at the minute, about they still have to pay these things: insurance, security, rent, insurance. There's a wide range of things, even if you're not open, you've still got to pay for these things. Variable cost is the opposite bit. Variable costs vary in direct proportion to output. So basically, we're saying is however many you sell times by however much it is gives you your variable cost. So the more you sell, the more expensive it is. So it's like saying if I had to pay YouTube 50p for every video I put up, then the more videos I put up, the more I would have to pay them, wouldn't I? You don't have to pay YouTube any money. But if you did, then that's what it would be like. So if output falls, variable cost falls. So in this situation, you do have a case where lots of businesses at this current situation, in a strange turn of events, are actually having to pay variable costs, even though they're not making any money, and that's an unusual circumstance. So don't use that in your answer. Usually just make it simple for yourself, and variable cost directly linked to output. So if there's no output, there's no cost. The weird thing that's happening in current situations, which is good for your AO4, I suppose, but if we just put our business analyst brains on, the weird thing that's happening at the moment is the fact that there is still either a governmental expectation for you to be providing when there is no income for variable costs and things like that, when usually it would not apply. It would be things like buying raw materials and things like that. If you didn't buy any raw materials, you wouldn't have to pay for anything. If people are on 0 hours contracts and they don't work, you don't have to pay them. But at this weird time that we're living in, it's kind of screwed the whole variable fixed cost things up. But just think about it really, really simply. If we make more of it, is it more expensive? There you go. That's it. All right. Semi-variable costs. Now, semi-variable costs aren't brought up very much. I don't want you to spend loads and loads of time on this because it's quite a complicated one, but it's not It's not really done in business a lot. I've never seen them actually ask a question on semi-variable costs. But semi-variable costs are costs that are made up of two cost components: a fixed component and a variable component, such as costs that vary with output or increase business activity, but not in direct proportion to it. So you could say, I mean, potentially you could say things like, I suppose you could have different levels of buying. So, for example, you could have something like a building where you rent a room, and then so the fixed cost is the room but once you meet capacity, you have to rent a second room. In which case, there's it. So what you'd have you'd have your fixed cost going fixed cost. I'm trying to think of your level. Fixed costs are going along like this, and then there would be to the point where you've hit capacity, and then there would be a jump like that, and then it would carry on. Oh, that makes sense. So there is a fixed sort of, it would be how would this be connected to it in terms of like the fixedness, the fixedness of it, where it doesn't sort of affect by output, would stay till a certain level, and then once you hit that capacity, it would jump up. That would be an example. You could also have things like I suppose, economies of scale. You could potentially have different levels of economies of scale, purchasing economies of scale, and things like that. Because it says the fixed component and the variable component, such costs vary with output or increased business activity, but not in direct proportion to it. So they're more expensive, but we don't have to pay half as much. So we only have to pay less than. It's not like it goes up by 50p every time. It might go up by 10p this time. It might go up by 20p. So I suppose it depends on the type of product that you're using. But semi-variable, it doesn't come up loads. It's not a massive thing. Don't get hung up on it anyway. All right. So when classifying costs, ask yourself if the cost is the same, whether I make none or I make a million products. If yes, it's fixed. If it's no, it's variable. If both components, it's semi-variable. Well, that's the difficulty, isn't it? What do you mean if it's both, it's semi-variable? That's the issue with sort of semi-variable cost. It's difficult to think of situations when that would actually be the case. But if you stick to fixed and variable, you're not half. You'll be pretty good. So let's have a look. We've got in the book as well. There's a thing about a florist. I think I've got it. I think I've got it later on. But if you've got it in the book, feel free to have a go. So the total cost of the costs of a firm added together, fixed and variable costs, or direct and indirect. Now remember, direct costs we'll talk about in a second, and indirect costs. But the main thing about them is direct costs directly linked to the production of things. Indirect costs are things which can't be linked to one specific product. So you might say the marketing for a product, you can't specifically, the marketing department will be working on a range of things. You won't directly be able to link to the provision of marketing to one specific product being made. You can't say, oh well, this Mars bar here is the marketing Mars bar. Once we've sold this Mars bar, then that's marketing paid for, or these are the marketing Mars bars, we have to sell these. It doesn't work like that. There isn't allotted innovation Mars bars or marketing Mars bars or research and development Mars bars. It doesn't work like that. It just covers whatever, doesn't it? So if fixed and variable costs are added together, they show the total cost of a business. The total cost of production is the cost of producing any level of output. As the output increases, total costs will rise. So it's just add everything together, you've got your total costs. We talk about these, we've talked about them when we talked about your income statements and things like that. We talked about these, didn't we? Another way to classify them is direct or indirect costs. Now, we talked about this a second ago, but direct costs are costs which can be identified with a particular product or process and which can directly related to producing a specific good or performing a specific service. So, they can be directly traced to a cost object, like raw materials or packaging or wages or whatever it is. So a direct cost could be the marketing department's wages, or how much wages does it cost to run this marketing campaign, or how much costs as it directly made to, if we were to divvy it up to one Mars bar, how much does it actually cost us to make one Mars bar? Well, you'd say, well, okay, well, it's going to take one person this amount of time, it's going to take some energy, it's going to take some blah blah blah. So we divvy up that amount or it's going to take 2 minutes of the machine being on, that kind of stuff. So we could work out how much does it actually cost to make that, the packaging of that actual Mars bar, yeah, not packaging for the whole idea or the design or anything like that, but the actual physical packaging that we use on that Mars bar can be directly linked to that physical Mars bar, that one product, rather than products in general. Whereas when we look at indirect costs, they're ones that we can't link to one product. They're the ones that we have to link to a range of things. So if I was to say to you, something like, how much did it cost us to make this car? Let's say we were talking about Audi or something like that. They wouldn't say, "Oh, well, there's a machine over there that cost £2 million, so that's that car's fault." And that car's fault over there. They wouldn't say that, would they? The cost of that machine is not directly linked to anything. It's a product which is going to be, it's a cost that is going to be divvied up between things, but it's not that car's fault. It's not that that stereo or that wheel's fault in terms of how much did it cost for that machine on that wheel. That the responsibility of paying that machine's cost is divvied up between everything. It's just a business cost, isn't it? We've also got things like managerial salaries. We don't say, oh, well, we only pay managerial salaries out of, the Mars bars or the Crunchies or the A4s or whatever it is. Rent, again, we don't divvy it up like that. It's not the responsibility of a certain department to pay for the rent. And when I mean that, I don't mean like physically pay it. I mean, physically make enough revenue to pay this. And insurance and things like that. So anything which is not directly linked to one part of the actual production, when you can't link it to one specific thing, then you're looking at your overheads, your indirect costs, things like rent, things like insurance, that kind of stuff, because that's for everything, isn't it? There isn't one Mars bar that pays for the insurance, or 10,000 Mars bars that pay for the insurance. But they're not the insurance Mars bars. It's just in general that we all have to pay it. Okay. Okay, so complete the table: indirect, fixed variable, or semi-variable. So I've done this for you, so feel free to stop the stream, have a go at it. I'll just give you a second. Welcome back. I like doing that because if you haven't stopped it, then you get a little treat. I've done them. I'll show you them on here. Okay, so direct or indirect. Well, rent, indirect, isn't it? There's no way that we can link it to anything specific. Managerial salaries, we just talked about, indirect. They're not linked to any one specific. Telephone bill, again, they're not really linked to any one specific product. Piece rate, labour. Piece rate, remember, is when we pay people per product to actually physically make a product. So of course that's going to be direct. It's about as direct as it can be, isn't it? Depreciation of equipment. Well, depreciation of equipment can be direct because it can be linked to a certain thing. How much depreciation is that product making, causing that machinery to depreciate by? Remember, depreciation is how much the actual value of the machinery decreases by over time. Hire of a company car, indirect. Again, it's not for one specific product. Materials used in production, direct. Maintenance cost of the machinery, direct, because we can link it again to what's happening. But let's have a look at these. Fixed variable or semi-variable. We've got rent fixed. We've got management salaries fixed. Telephone bill, semi-variable. That's a difficult one because semi-variable, because there could be a contract where it's fixed, where it doesn't matter how much you use, but then it usually does have an end to it, where if you go over, then you might have to, or if you want to do a picture video, when you text pictures rather than doing them on WhatsApp and stuff, you have to pay a premium for that. So potentially semi-variable. Piece rate, variable. Depreciation of equipment, variable. Hire of a company car, fixed. Doesn't matter how much you use it. Within reason, you could potentially say that's semi-variable as well, couldn't you? Because it is going to matter how much you use it. But it doesn't link to the production of a product, does it? In that regard, it doesn't directly increase with product or anything like that. Materials used in production is variable. Obviously, the more we buy, the more that we need to purchase, the more that we buy of them. So of course it's going to be maintenance cost of machinery, again variable, because the more we use of it, the more machinery help it's going to need. I hope that makes sense. I hope it doesn't just sound like I'm rambling, but I think it's hard to describe something like this because it's actually just quite obvious. So yeah, I'm probably just over talking it. That's why it's difficult to talk about sometimes. Now, it says plot fixed costs on a graph, answer the questions. This is in your book. Basically, I'll just show you. Fixed cost. I don't know whether this will translate well. Yeah, it's backwards. Let me do it backwards. Will look like that. Okay. So can you see this line here is the fixed cost line. If you can see, it's going across without it's at one line. It doesn't matter how much output increases. So that's essentially what fixed cost should look like. It should be on the graph. It should be a horizontal line that just dissects it and continues on at the same thing. So if it's 2,000, it's going to dissect at 2,000. It's going to continue at 2,000 no matter how many we make. Okay, a couple of things on there for you to do. Let's have a look at variable costs. What's the definition? Examples, plot variable costs. Well, variable costs would be the opposite, wouldn't they? Variable costs would be more like that, because variable costs start at 0. If you're making no products, they start at 0. If you're making more products, then there's going to be more of them. So basically, it's going to look like a diagonal line dissecting the graph, isn't it? Essentially, so if we make 0, then we'll have 0 costs. So it's going to start at 0, whereas your fixed cost line wouldn't start at 0, because even if you sold 0, you're still going to have to pay these things. Doesn't matter if you don't manage to pay anything that month, your rent is still going to need to be paid. Okay, couple of things that you can have a go at with these as well. Feel free, as I said, to pause the stream and have a go at these things. You've got level of production, you've got your fixed costs, your variable costs, your total costs. So let's just do a couple of them together. I'll do them on here. So fixed costs, we've got 0, we've got fixed cost 10, variable costs. Well, how much is it going to cost us if we're making 0 level of production? Well, there's going to be 0 variable cost then, isn't there? So total cost, $100. Oh, how long's that been like that? Oh no. Well, how long? Yeah, when did that come through? Can't hear you for some reason. When did you stop being able to hear me? Do I need to go back? I can't check. I can't check. Uh, I'm going to take it as it's only just happened. I don't know why it's just happened, but I'll take it as it's a reasonable thing. So I'll a few slides. Oh no, a few slides. Why's that happened? It's aggravating. Probably like 4 slides. Great. Right, let's go back. There's no way of me doing this, so I might as well just go back. What from there? Is that okay? What I'll do is I will cut it up in the actual final cut of this. Um, is there a need for me to go through it again? Did it make sense? No, I will. Um, did this make sense? What I was doing this? So just filling in those, and then we've got the formulas and the calculations um, of these. There is a delay, by the way, on this as well. So if it seems like I'm going over the top, so apologies to those of you who've just joined us. There was an issue with the mic. I don't know why it went off, but yeah. Anyway, well, you've got them anyway. To be honest, the ones that we were talking about there, the in terms of the things we've actually got, there's probably no need to do it from massively to have a big issue because I it's pretty self-explanatory. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it here. So there you go. So yeah, so cost. You've got your costs and your stuff in there that we've just completed. So have a go at them if you want. We've got our formulas and calculations, all these thingies. As I said, I don't know if you clocked it, but I was saying one of the things that really messed people up in the exam is they there can be other things that you're asked in an exam which you'd think wouldn't mess people up, but sometimes it's common sense. So they would like say how many weeks are in a year, and then people would divide it up by the wrong amount. It's not 49 weeks in a year. All right. How many days are in a week? People do crazy things. Oh well, how many days are in a month? Oh well, I'll divide it up by 30, or blah blah blah. It's dead confusing, but try not to. If whatever you do in the exam, just make sure that you read the question, but try and make sensible inferences. Because if it says a year and you divide it by 49, then you're going to get it wrong. Because unfortunately, that's not how many weeks are in a year. Okay, so yeah, you've got your variable costs that you've your various formulas and calculations there. You've got your stakeholders. So let's have a look at stakeholders. This is where we got up to, wasn't it? So stakeholders. So stakeholders have are massively impacted by differences in things like this in terms of increases or decreases in costs, fixed and variable. One of the big ones I'd say is the customer being a stakeholder, massively impacted because you have an option as a business whether or not to, like give the profit margin over basically. So let's say your cost increases, which happens quite a lot depending on whatever's happening. Remember, it only takes a small increase in oil prices or something like that, which you have no impact, have no control over. And then that's going to increase the amount that it costs to make lots and lots of things. It increases fuel costs, so that increases. Let's say a chippy, right? So someone making chips in a chip shop, you wouldn't think oil prices would make a difference to them, but it does, because if you have oil prices, then that's oil prices increases, and that increases the amount of cost it makes to put fuel in a tractor. If you put the fuel cost up to put a tractor, then it costs more physically, variable cost wise, to actually take the potatoes out. Then if the potatoes are more expensive, then that's going to increase. But you've also got to think about the other things. What about the actual frying oil that you've got to put in? Well, that's going to probably go up in price because, again, it's going to cost more to actually produce the stuff. Can you see how it works? So your stakeholders are going to be impacted quite a lot by a range of things on this. It says salaries increase, cheaper insurance, things like that, quantity sold decreases, selling price. This is a brilliant opportunity. What I would say for you, if you are wanting to just spend 20 minutes, 25 minutes today doing a really, really useful bit of data analysis for you that's really going to help you in this exam, I'd say just spend a bit of time today going through each one of these. Just do it. Literally go through how is it going to affect them? Is it going to massively affect them? Is it not going to affect them? And link them back to those stakeholder wants and needs. So what do customers want? What do consumers want? What do employees want? What do managers want? That kind of stuff. So don't underestimate the power of literally spending 20 minutes, 25 minutes on something like this. It'd be really, really helpful for you. Just get you back into the way of thinking as well. Okay. Now, last one I want to talk to you about today really is contribution, and people massively underestimate the power of contribution. I didn't even really know about contribution until sort of university time, and I had been told about it. I just didn't really listen in class as much as I should have done. And contribution is one of those things. It's a strange name for something, and it's not in business. I like business because a lot of the names are really obvious. Like fixed cost makes sense to me because it's fixed; it doesn't increase with output, so that makes sense to me. And variable cost makes sense as well. But when we get to contribution, you think, what do you mean contribution? What is it about? What's it contributing? What does that mean? Well, it is simpler than it seems. Basically, what we're saying is it shows how much each unit contributes towards paying fixed costs once it's covered its variable cost. Okay, so in terms of this, I don't know why it says once it's covered profit. It shouldn't be once it's covered profit. Once it's covered, it is profit. Basically, once it's covered the cost, it becomes that. But it's not. Don't go off that because that'll confuse you. Once it's covered, that would be better. So it is calculated by selling price minus variable cost. So basically what we're saying here is when you once you've paid your cost of sales, once you've paid how much it actually cost me to make this pen, what about all the other costs that come into it? What about the stuff that's not directly? What about the indirect cost? What about the fixed cost that isn't linked to this, sort of the rent on the building and the insurance and all that stuff that I can't directly link to this pen? So I've got to so if I say I sell this pen for £1, okay, that might mean that 40p of it is variable cost. It actually cost me 40p to physically create this pen. That in cost that I can directly link to the production of this pen, the plastic, the colouring and that in it. And but then I've got more things to take into account. I've got 60p there to be able to go towards my fixed costs, so like my rent and things like that. So I can say, right, okay, so 60p from that is going to go towards that. And once I've sold a certain amount of these, of the 60p's, the 60p's will all add up till I've covered my rent or I've covered my insurance or whatever it is. Does that make sense? So it's the money that it's money that you spend on variable costs, and once the variable cost is covered, it's the money that you then you contribute towards fixed costs once the variable cost has been covered. All right. So it says selling price minus variable cost gives you give you contribution per unit, and then your sales revenue minus your total variable cost gives you total contribution. So you can use these really, really well. It says total contribution is the amount of contribution from all units sold. E.g., if they sold 500 Mars bars, each given a contribution of 15p, this total contribution would be 75 quid. All right. Now, with this, if I was to give you that in an exam and ask you about contribution and say, well, actually, what's the variable cost on these then? So you'd be able to tell me from this, well, if there's 15p contribution, then the variable cost for this product must have been 85p because they've only got 15p left to go towards their fixed costs. Does that make sense? Contribution's an important one. Okay, so you can calculate profit using the contribution method as well. So if you don't like doing profit between like revenue minus cost, or if you haven't got revenue minus cost minus total cost to figure out your profit, then you can also do sales revenue minus total variable cost, because we know that sales revenue gives you that's the total amount that you've made. Total variable cost takes off that gives you total contribution. If you then take off your fixed costs, then you've got your profit or loss as well, haven't you? So it's basically like the same thing, but just in a slightly different way. Okay. Now, yeah, I think in terms of that, aside from having a little bit of an issue in the middle with the mic, I don't know why it did that. That's really strange. It never does that. And I even keep it. It's just below the screen here, so I can see it. But I only clocked it a little while into it. But thank you for telling me. Anyway, we're gonna have a little look at the news like we usually do, and see what is happening in the world. So let's go to the BBC. Let's find out. Let's refresh so we know it's brand new information. Right, okay. Let's have a look at this one. The number of people diagnosed with coronavirus has risen to 200,000 according to Spain's health ministry. Nearly 400 new deaths have been reported since yesterday, bringing the total to 20,852. Second highest number in the confirmed cases in the world, behind the US. What's it saying about Germany or something? Oh, let's have a look at this one. As I said, I don't want to be really depressing about stuff like this, but I think it's important to keep track of it. Across the UK, 16,060 people have died with coronavirus in hospitals as of 5 p.m. See, interesting what they've said there, isn't it? In hospitals, that doesn't mean that couldn't be significantly more. This figure, as the numbers below, are expected to be higher with non-hospital deaths taken into account. In terms of testing, 372,967 people have been tested in the UK, of which 120,000 plus tested positive. So, we're looking realistically, it's more than 10%, isn't it? In terms of if you've tested positive, it's more than 10%. That's what's worrying at the minute. And have you heard about this as well? This is crazy, isn't it? Protesters have taken to the streets in the states across the US, demanding that the governors reopen economies shut by the coronavirus pandemic. Rallies took place in Arizona, Colorado, Montana, and Washington state, following earlier protests in other states. Most of the crowds numbered in the low hundreds. He signalled support for the protests. I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it. Donald Trump has signalled support for the protests. Is the guy an idiot? Well, I'll leave that up to you. The US has become the epicenter of the coronavirus crisis with over 735,000 cases and some 40,000 deaths, but the signs have emerged that it is reaching the apex of the outbreak and that the infection rates are slowing. I'm really pleased for them. Let's go completely backwards and start opening everything then. Right. Oh, here we are. Restrictions are easing across Europe, with Germany reopening some shops, pupils returning to kindergarten in Norway, and Poland allowing people to visit parks and forests. In Denmark, where pupils return to primary schools and nurseries on Wednesday, businesses like hairdressers, dentists, and tattoo parlours are now reopening. You can read more about it. He says the crisis is not over in this country. The death toll near 20,000. Face masks soon become compulsory to wear on public transport, and the government plans to produce enough masks for everyone to wear. Random testing program in Slovenia. Teams will visit the homes of 3,000 people a day to carry out antibody tests. It's crazy. It's crazy. I understand it's madness, but you've got to be careful. This was what they were saying, wasn't it? If you remember, they said that people would get bored of it, and you know, that's that seems to be what's happening. I don't know whether it's sensible to start trying to bring people back though. What's that saying? Right, let's have a look at the business news. Mr. Kipling. Hey, we love a Mr. Kipling, don't we? Sales of Bachelor Super Noodles, Smash Instant Mashed Potato, and Lloyd Grossman sauces have jumped as people stock up for the in-store cupboard items during lockdown, Premier Foods has said. The company which owns the brand said demand for Mr. Kipling and Cadbury home baking kits was also up. It credited the exceptional demand in March for more meals being eaten at home. After trading update, the shares of the business jumped 17%. So it's not a bad time to be in Mr. Kipling in terms of, what was they called, Premier Foods? The food group has said its manufacturing plants and distribution networks continue to work at maximum capacity during the challenging time. It's therefore given each factory worker 2 additional days of annual leave and a £250 cash bonus. There you go. Premier Foods get it. Mr. Kipling gets it. Why don't the NHS give it? Give people money. That's what people want. All right. Reward them for putting themselves on the line. These people are going to work every day. Volumes have started to reduce from the exceptional level seen in March, although we're still expected to continue to be higher than average patterns of demand. I mean, it's not a bad thing for businesses, this is it. You know, no one's going to complain about having too much demand. This reflects, well, within reason. This reflects more meals being eaten at home than usual due to recent measures set out by the government and hence increased demand for the group's product ranges. It comes on the back of the surging supermarket sales over the past month. The average household has spent an extra £62.92 at supermarkets in March. I don't believe that. I think it's more than that. I definitely spent more than that. An extra 62 quid? Nah. The average household, perhaps. It said, let's have a look at this one. Asda cancels orders with suppliers. Okay. Asda is cancelling a quarter of orders with clothing suppliers despite seeing record food sales during the coronavirus pandemic. The supermarket chain has also told suppliers that would only pay for part of such cancelled orders. A spokesperson for the supermarket said that COVID-19 had had a significant impact on the fashion industry. Yes, but Asda, you are making massive, massive profits, as we know that the average person has spent an extra £62.92 or whatever it was in your shop, so you shouldn't be trying to stiff you suppliers, should you? One supplier told the newspaper that the behaviour is totally unacceptable. I totally agree. It's completely unreasonable. Yes, you are going to have to take a cut on this, but you are making massive profits from this. So get stuffed, Asda. That's not reasonable. It says they added that it was ridiculous for the firm, which is owned by US retailer Walmart, not to pay for orders. Asda told the BBC that suppliers will be paid 30% of the order value to those that have not been finished and half of those that have. The rise to 60% of manufacturers based in Bangladesh. It is committed to paying the costs within 7 working days, as well as agreeing suppliers can resell items or donate them to charity. Oh, well done, Asda. Good on you. Yeah. So you're not paying for you. Yeah. So they're saying to people, basically, they've made orders, they're not going to pay them. They're not going to pay for. They're only paying 50% of them. And they're being so nice about it that you can sell them on. Oh yeah, thank you very much. And who's going to be buying these things at the minute, Asda? The reason you're not buying them is because no one's buying them at the minute. The move comes as the chain has seen a surge in demand for groceries in the UK. Consumers are staying home, but the supermarket says the warehouse and in-store colleagues are focused on getting food onto our shelves for essential retail. Yes. Meanwhile, it has invested in additional storage space for products it says it's struggling to sell during the coronavirus. The supermarket said that it has been a severe downturn in demand for clothing. I wonder why, Asda. I wonder why, but this is what the point of it. There will be times when there's unreasonable, completely unreasonable. Boycott Asda. Can we get that trending, please? Mr. Businessman says boycott Asda, because that is completely unreasonable, and they are going to screw people over in that. Let's do one more. Green's retail empire could close up to 100 stores. The UK's first TikTok house opens during pandemic. Oh, they all look like lots of fun people, don't they? Look at them. They all look fun, don't they? I bet they're a really fun group of people. I'm gonna have to have a look. What does that mean? Oh, their faces annoy me, to be honest. And that's upsetting, isn't it? Seb Monty Surface LDN. What do you mean Surface LDN? That can't be his name. Surface? Is he sponsored by Microsoft or something? 6 of the UK's most popular TikTok content creators have moved in together and are trying to meet surging demand for teenagers in lockdown, despite some doubts about the timing. The Bite Squad Collective planned to move prior to the coronavirus pandemic. What? Right, so this doesn't make sense. a short form. It's just, is it not just the same as bloody Vine? Is that not the same thing? Who cares? How is that news? Goodness me. Some random people have moved in together, right? Okay, Green's retail empire could close up to 100 stores. Can you see can you see how diverse these these two things are? This is talking about people's lives. We've got on the other page, we've got people dying, and then we've got 6 of the most annoying people on the planet have decided to move in together. Great, thank you very much. Sir Philip Green's Arcadia Group. Who is it who I know who work for Arcadia? They used to talk about it quite a lot. He's serving notice on landlords to walk away from more than 100 stores. The fashion group owns brands such as Topshop and Dorothy Perkins and has over 550 stores across the UK, but all are shut due to coronavirus. Arcadia was struggling before the pandemic. In 2019, it did a deal to survive with landlords to cut rents to close 23 stores, and 12 more closed this year. In 2019... like other retailers grappling with the fallout from the deserted high streets and collapsing sales, Sir Philip's retail empire has been thrown into turmoil. Most of his 16,000 staff are being paid through the government's furlough scheme, and bosses are taking a pay cut. But the coronavirus is now accelerating the potentially dramatic shrinkage of the business. Arcadia has already been closing stores over the years as leases expired. This is the point, isn't it? A lot of businesses were on the brink anyway, weren't they? Debenhams said on Friday that 7 of its stores would not reopen. It's trying to secure new deals with the landlords that include a 5-month rent and service charge holiday. Well, what are those rentals supposed to do? What are those businesses supposed to do? The department stores agreed terms on 120 of its 142 stores so far, and in advanced discussions about the remainder of its estate. The business is in administration to protect it from creditors during the lockdown. This is crazy, but Debenhams probably isn't going to come back. And if it's in this sort of state, then I don't think Debenhams is going to be around for very much longer, is it? That's just probably the way it's going to be. So, ladies and gents, thank you very much for joining me. I'm sorry about the bit of a technical hiccup in the middle of it, but I hope it didn't massively detract you from the thing today. We're going to be back to it. Remember, 10 a.m. every day. Go back to the channel if you've not had a chance to have a look. Go back on the channel, there's loads and loads of stuff on there. All sorts of different topics, all sorts of different lessons, all sorts of different funnies. I've put some more up, because I know that people by far like the funny stuff more than anything of just me doing silly voices and whatever it is. I've also done, if you didn't notice, over the Easter break, I've done a couple more episodes of Business Explained using video games, 3-minute videos just about different video games. So if you are into video games, we have got currently... we have got Grand Theft Auto, we have got Call of Duty Warzone, and we have got Mario. So there is a couple more. I'm going to do 6 of them for the first series of it, and then go from there. So I hope you're keeping safe. I hope to see you tomorrow, and I will speak to you all then. Okay? Peace.